Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. At the age of 54, Professor Jonathan, a pseudonym, had already achieved much in life. He was a senior lecturer, a respected Christian theologian, and an author of interfaith spiritual books. With his graying hair and a face that radiated wisdom, no one would have guessed that his life was about to change in a single night through a meeting he never planned for. He had been invited as a speaker at an interfaith symposium, an event that brought together leaders of different faiths to discuss the grand theme, truth and humanity in the scriptures. The event unfolded as expected. The discussions were warm, with one panel after another filled by academics and religious figures. However, that night spotlight subtly shifted to a quiet, lesser-known figure, an elderly imam with a white beard, wearing a simple robe. He introduced himself simply as Abdul and chose to sit quietly in a corner, barely speaking. After the official sessions ended, the participants mingled in a small dining area prepared by the organizers. It was here that destiny brought Professor Jonathan and Imam Abdul together. They sat side by pure chance. At first, it was just small talk. Then Professor Jonathan asked, "May I ask, what is it that you believe most deeply about the Quran?" Imam Abdul gave a slight smile. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he posed a quiet but deep question. "Do you believe that God can speak to humans without error?" Professor Jonathan paused for a moment. The question was simple, yet carried profound depth. He replied softly, "I do believe that. But I also know human writing is full of interpretations." Imam Abdul pulled a small English-translated Quran from his pocket. He handed it to Professor Jonathan and said, "Read this, and if you are in doubt about what we have sent down to our servant, then produce a chapter like it." Professor Jonathan read the verse, then looked up at Imam Abdul. "It sounds like a challenge, as if the book is saying, if you doubt it, then prove it." Imam Abdul nodded, and replied, "The Quran doesn't ask for blind belief. It challenges your intellect. It invites you to think. Because truth does not fear being tested." The conversation went on for nearly 2 hours. They spoke of the origins of revelation, about Prophet Muhammad, an illiterate man who delivered a message that changed the world, and about the Quran's preservation over the centuries. Professor Jonathan, who had always viewed Islam from a distance, felt as though a veil had been lifted from his eyes. He said, "I've taught theology for 30 years. But tonight, I heard something purer than all the academic debates I've ever been part of." Imam Abdul simply smiled. "Islam is not just to be studied. It's to be felt. If your heart feels peace when you hear it, that's a sign. It is God who moves hearts." That night, Professor Jonathan couldn't sleep. He replayed every word Imam Abdul had said. He reread the pocket Quran that was given to him. For some reason, his chest felt light. His heart trembled. He felt at peace. 2 weeks after the event, Professor Jonathan visited Imam Abdul again. This time, it was at a small mosque. With a trembling voice, he said, "I'm not coming here today as a professor. I come as a seeker of truth. And I found that light in the Quran." With tears streaming down his face, he recited the Shahada. Everyone in the mosque wept with emotion. Imam Abdul bowed his head in humility, then embraced the professor, now his brother in faith. Today, Professor Jonathan, who chose the name Yusuf after embracing Islam, spends his days not only teaching at the university but also writing about Islam, fostering interfaith dialogue, and sharing the story of his extraordinary journey. In one of his seminars, he said, "I spent my life searching for the truth. But only when I stopped seeking academic grandeur and opened my heart, did I find it in the simplest of words: there is no God but Allah. We never know through which door Allah's guidance will arrive. It could come from a single meeting, a single sentence, or even from someone we barely notice." The story of this professor is proof that truth will always find its way to an open heart. So never underestimate the power of one sincere conversation. A few months after reciting the Shahada, Professor Yusuf's life changed dramatically. He still taught at the university, but now his lectures carried a more reflective tone, often touching on themes of Tawheed, the oneness of God, tolerance, and the importance of the heart in understanding faith. But there was one place that had become the center of his life, a small mosque on the outskirts of the city, where Imam Abdul had served as imam and caretaker for decades. The mosque was far from grand. Its roof was made of tin, the paint on the walls had faded, and the carpet had worn thin. Yet its atmosphere was serene, spiritual, and full of love. Professor Yusuf began visiting every day. At first, just for prayer. Then, he started helping Imam Abdul sweep the yard, organize Quran shelves, and even repair the broken lighting system in the prayer hall. One day, after the Fajr prayer, Imam Abdul approached him. "Yusuf, you're not just a guest in this mosque. You're part of this home now. Would you be willing to help me take care of it?" Professor Yusuf looked down, his eyes brimming with tears. "It would be an honor, Imam. I'm not worthy, but if you allow me, I want to learn." From that day forward, he officially became a caretaker of the mosque. But not as someone who sits behind a desk or gives orders. He chose to serve, sweeping the floors, turning on the lights, greeting worshippers one by one with a smile, even cooking meals for the children who came to learn Quran. At first, people were surprised. A professor graduate of a prestigious university mopping mosque floors? But it was precisely that humility that touched hearts. The congregation began to grow. Young people who had once stayed away from the mosque started to show up, curious about Professor Yusuf, who always had time to sit and listen. One of the most beautiful initiatives they began was a post-Maghrib study circle held on the mosque's veranda. Professor Yusuf didn't replace Imam Abdul, but rather complemented him. The Imam would recite and explain the meaning of Quranic verses, while Yusuf would relate them to the modern world with both reason and heart. For example, when discussing the verse, "Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of night and day, are signs for those of understanding." Professor Yusuf would elaborate with scientific insight, but always ended with a gentle reflection. This verse isn't just for physicists or astronomers. It's for anyone willing to pause and reflect that none of this is random. Then Imam Abdul would add, "Truth is like the sun. You can reject it, but you can't erase its light." That very night, a few young men approached and asked, "Professor, may we help clean the mosque too?" Professor Yusuf smiled. His heart overflowed with gratitude. He never imagined that, in the final stretch of his life, he would find true life on the floor of a humble mosque, alongside an old imam he now considered like a father. One night, after a quiet Qiyamul Layl prayer attended by just a few, Imam Abdul sat on the mosque steps. Professor Yusuf joined him, bringing 2 cups of warm tea. Then the imam softly said, "I am old, Yusuf. My time may not be much longer. But I am at peace because I know this mosque will live on. Because you've cared for it not just as a building, but as a soul." Professor Yusuf looked down, holding the imam's hand gently. "I've done nothing, Imam. If anything, this mosque saved my life." That night, the sky was clear. The stars above bore witness to 2 servants of God, men from vastly different paths brought together by the light of faith. Knowledge can take you to the heights of the world, but only faith can lead you to the depths of the heart. The story of Professor Yusuf and Imam Abdul is proof that divine guidance knows no age, title, or status. When the heart opens, Allah will place you exactly where you're meant to be, even if that place is on the floor of a modest mosque.